Evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening for this latest in Ecclesiastical Law Bite-Sized. And this evening we're joined by the Rt Revd Christopher Hill. Bishop Christopher, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, Christopher Hill, retired from nearly 10 years. I was Guildford Diocese. Before that, Area Bishop of Stafford, and before that at St Paul's Cathedral, and before that for 15 years working ecumenically at Lambeth in international ecumenical relations, and before that in Lichfield Diocese, which is my home diocese, in two parishes, both in or around the Black Country and Wolverhampton.
Thank you. This evening...
But can I first, Bishop Moira, congratulate you on your first Zoom as a bishop. And
Thank you.
We all congratulate you on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think Russ and I thought it was quite funny that this one would be just after I'd been consecrated and we'd be talking about bishops. Yes. In particular, we're going to be talking about diocesan bishops, but I suggest those of us who are suffragan bishops, we'll sneak in a little into it. But anyhow, let's cast our minds back. Before I was an archdeacon, if I'm honest, I didn't really have a lot to do with bishops directly, but I do remember I had to swear at them when I started a role. So what was that all about?
Well, when you say swearing, swearing in front of them, I think, rather than at them.
Fair enough.
I'm sure. Yes. You had to do some swearing of obedience and things like that. The oath of canonical obedience is very, very much misunderstood. It is absolutely not that you have to be obedient to a bishop's views, opinions, theology even, but you do have to have some obedience to canonical matters and the law. In other words, it's a very regulated sense of obedience. You are promising to keep the law of the Church of England as it is expressed through the bishop and episcopacy and the canons of the church. There are occasions when bishops expect people to follow their whims or fancies or indeed their policy, but unless it's canon law or unless it's the ecclesiastical law, you haven't got to be obedient.
I was also, as an archdeacon, I used to read the preface and sort of administer the declarations and oaths.
Yes.
And of course, the first one was Declaration of Assent, which was all part of the whole deal. And when I was consecrated a couple of weeks ago, it is now, there I was standing up making a Declaration of Assent again. Why do I have to keep doing that?
I can just assure all people on this Zoom that I heard Bishop Moira, well, she wasn't a bishop then, but I heard her make her Declaration of Assent before we laid hands on her. Declaration of Assent is important. It, of course, is about our faith, the scriptures, the Catholic creeds, and we're in the celebration of the Nicene Creed's 1700th anniversary this year, and Moira and I were present in Chichester for that, with the Ecumenical Patriarch from Constantinople just a few weeks ago, as was Russell. The thing about the Declaration of Assent is, yes, belief is individual, but in the Christian Church, in the body of Christ, of which we're all members, we have a corporate sense of belief, a creedal sense of belief, a scriptural sense of belief, and this is that indication of that. Every time you get ordained, deacon, priest, presbyter, bishop, or move, or take up a new office, in almost all cases, you take the Declaration of Assent. It's handily available in the opening pages of Common Worship, so it's there available. You don't have to have a book of canon law to read it. However, I'm now going to be a grumpy old man, and I'm going to have a grump. When I was Bishop of Guildford and ordaining, I did some ordinations when I was Bishop of Stafford as well, but when I was doing the charge with the ordinands, with the deacons, I very soon discovered that in one occasion, only a third of those who I was about to ordain knew anything about the Declaration of Assent or the oaths of obedience, of canonical and then the loyal obedience. So after that, I shaped my charges, my episcopal charges, around what we were about to go through: faith, the scriptural Catholic faith of the creeds, and the declarations of obedience, etc. I found in practice that it was often about a third knew what they were doing. The other 2/3 vaguely knew, some of them vaguely knew they've got to do something like that, but at least a third had never actually seen what they were going to assent to. I pulled my hair out, and my ministry division team, after they got something from me, well, made very sure after that that the theological college were alerted the fact that I expected any ordinand in Guildford to at least be aware of what they were going to promise. Interestingly, I found courses, people trained on courses, were sometimes better prepared than those at some, and I won't name which, theological colleges. That's enough of my rant. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you. So there we are. We're both bishops, but I'm not a diocesan bishop. So what's so special about diocesan bishops in the Church of England?
Well, as you know, in your relationship with the Bishop of Exeter, the bishop has certain restricted things that he or she does or do. Suffragan bishops do ordinations, I've just said. It varies in different dioceses. In some cases, particularly larger dioceses, and certainly dioceses where there's an area system, the area bishop or the in one place will often do the priests, whereas all the deacons are done together. That was the Lichfield pattern. It may have changed now, but all the deacons were done in the cathedral, whereas the priesting ordinations were done in the different areas by the relevant area bishops. So one of the things that there has to be is a good collaboration between the area bishops or the suffragan bishops and the diocesan bishop. The diocesan bishop has reserved to her or him all disciplinary matters, all because now under the old CDM and the new clergy conduct measure, which is still sort of slowly getting through the scrutiny committee of Parliament, all those things are restricted to the diocesan bishop. But that actually makes an interesting task for the suffragan bishop, because if you have a discipline case, the diocesan is not allowed in law to be dealing with the pastoral side of that. And that is very clear because there'll be a conflict of roles. So there needs to be a person appointed to do the pastoral side of things for the respondent, the priest who has an accusation or a complaint made against them. And quite often, the suffragan bishop can do that very well indeed. And then the priest will feel that there is somebody in episcopal orders actually shepherding, caring for them, whether they are guilty, not guilty, or half guilty, or whether they it's a false accusation or a malicious accusation, or just vexatious, or he or she have done something seriously wrong.
I mean, continuing with discipline, when we had the working party reflecting on the current clergy discipline measure and making our suggestions towards the clergy conduct measure, we were aware at the time that there were a number of diocesans who wanted to be taken out of that discipline role so they could just care for their clergy. And we felt it was important to keep diocesan bishops involved in discipline. Why did we feel that?
I totally agree, and that was one of my submissions as well through the ELS. To such bishops who may have taken that view, I would say, would you read again the ordinal with which you were ordained or consecrated? You can, if you look at the Common Worship Ordinal, and then look at the canons, and in particular the canon C18:6. I think that's the one. Don't hold me on that. Russell will correct afterwards. The canons are clear that, of course, the bishop has the chief disciplinary role. Canons also say that the bishop, the diocesan bishop, is there, is the chief pastor for laity. The phrase is as well as the clergy. And just sometimes clergy understand why they feel this. A priest who has a complaint against them, they feel that the bishop must be there as pastor pastorum, which is a phrase sometimes used, shepherd of the shepherds. It's used more commonly in Lutheran theology of episcopacy. But actually, the bishop is there for the whole church. And if you think of safeguarding issues, if you think of lay people who have suffered because of the abuse of clergy, whether young or vulnerable people particularly, then the bishop must be the champion of justice and not just an advocate on behalf of a possibly misbehaving clergy person. Yeah, so I think that's how I would respond to that. And
so we have diocesans involved with discipline, involved with ordinations, although I can have that delegated to me. What other things are there legally that are in the bishop's hands?
Well, of course, it will vary from diocese to diocese on the particular commission to suffragan bishops. But suffragan bishops are always visiting parishes, quite rightly. And one of the things I think I want to say there is that the bishop in general is a chief minister of word and sacrament. And the suffragan bishop is maybe representing the diocesan as well as being an episcopal orders themselves. But in that case, they are the chief minister of word and sacrament in that parish at that particular time. I found that some clergy well understood this. Others, it insisted on try to make me feel like a visitor to the parish. And I said, I wasn't rude about this. I was relatively subtle. I said, well, no, actually, there is a chair in this church, or in most churches anyway, a cathedra of some sort, usually tucked away in a corner on the north of the sanctuary, and usually very uncomfortable. But the bishop is actually at home in every one of their churches, his or her churches, and that is very clear if clergy read carefully common worship notes on the Eucharist and other aspects of worship. Clergy are still not very good about really exploiting the riches of common worship. We get a wonderful variety of things. When it first came in, some clergy simply went from A to Z and did everything. And of course, the service was about 3 hours long. Well, I exaggerate, but it was quite unnecessarily complicated. But the notes about who presides and how they preside make it perfectly clear that the bishop does have a very special ministry of worship and leading worship.
And what about our ministry of teaching?
Again, if you look at the ordinals, the Common Worship Ordinal and the Book of Common Prayer Ordinal, which, though not used much, is still a standard of doctrine for the Church of England, it's perfectly clear that the bishop's role is to teach, and that's not so difficult. People do expect the bishop to preach, and I always made a point of always preaching on the gospel of the day, because that's given in the lectionary. That gives us the breadth of the Christian seasons to go through, and there's always something there that is worthy of teaching. And then, of course, you're immediately going into the creed, usually the Nicene Creed. At initiation services, baptism, confirmation, the Apostles' Creed, which is the Western baptismal creed, so there's plenty of material to go there. And very occasionally, I go to a parish where they were doing a particular scriptural series, doing the Colossians or something, usually more on the evangelical side. That, of course, is perfectly legitimate. Out of the seasonal time in common worship, you can choose for the non-gospel reading. You could go through, or you could do the other way around. And if I was alerted as to what they were doing, I'd be happy to do a bit of expository teaching. But basically, teaching the faith, and there the baptism and confirmation services were, of course, just a given. And in my experience, I did more and more baptisms, both adult but also older children at confirmation services, and you'll find out more. And that's very enriching. And there you've got it, faith in the Trinity.
So those are what seem to be the really profound historic parts of the role. But from what I've seen of my diary, I seem to have plenty of committees. And I was at the Bishop's Council, and there was the Diocesan Bishop chairing it. What do we make then of this role in governance that bishops have?
The word bishop, as you know, is a secular Greek word, meaning something like he or she who looks over, an overseer. In the French Reformed churches, the equivalent of a bishop, maybe not in terms of ordination succession, but in terms of role, is called the inspecteur ecclésiastique, which is not a bus conductor or a bus inspector, but gives a sense of an oversight of things, and that does involve governance. And so I'm not afraid of governance, and wasn't. But the best way to govern is to govern alongside and with other people. Your clergy team in terms of the diocese, archdeacons, suffragans, and the lay team of the diocese as well in the staff meeting. And so governance that's not quite the same thing as management. I don't think I'm a good manager. I certainly don't think I was ordained to do management, at least in one rather than that restricted, rather American sense of church leadership. But I'm trailing my cassock and I'm not wearing one at the moment. But governance is a part of the office of bishop, and it has to be got through. I have to say I enjoyed our staff meetings. I actually enjoyed diocesan synods a little bit more than general synod, and partly because of the friendship which followed from working together with clergy and laity.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that. We'll now finish the recording, and then there's a chance for people to ask questions.